I read every page of every single week, and I looked at it yesterday and I thought, goodness me, that's a big heavy one.
It's a long Shabbos afternoon then.
Well, no, I have a share on Shabbos afternoon.
Oh.
Every single Shabbos afternoon, I have a share.
Do you give the share?
I'm not capable of giving anything. We have a Sedra share, lady and I, and we've had it for a few years now, and she comes around every Shabbos afternoon and we discuss the Sedra for about an hour and a half.
Wow. Fascinating. Amazing. That's brilliant. That is absolutely amazing. Wow.
Yes, it's a shame. It's a shame the mine's not as brilliant as a share, but we try. I try. She's very good.
Fantastic.
I love it. And then I read Tversky on Chumash, and I read Johnson Sachs, and then we go through everything. She says what she's learned at her share, and I say what I've learned at my share, and then we have a discussion about the share, about the Sedra.
Tremendous.
Wow.
Baruch Hashem, good things.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to learn then. Let's start learning. We're going to learn, and the rest of Hashem also, we've got a lot to cover, because as we said, it's a very thick chiyenu. It happens to be, if your bar mitzvah is this week, a Matos Masei, this is your longest reading setup you can have. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is longer than Parshas Nasa, which is the longest Parsha, but because you got two long ones together, it makes it a real good one. Baruch Hashem. So let's make it special. Let's make it learn. But of course, before we do the summary of the Parsha, we're going to do what is going on in the Jewish calendar, and then we're going to go on to what's going on in the Parsha before we pick one particular area that wants to give us a relevant, practical life message for today. It's going to empower us to be Mashiach people. People are living in Mashiach 24/7. So that's the game plan. Let's get started. We're going to start off, if I can get this to work, we'll do with it. Otherwise, we'll do it without it. Oh, we're doing it. Baruch Hashem. This week, the shir on heaven on earth, timeless vessels, timely lessons, is kindly sponsored by Mrs. and Family Abrams. Join along tomorrow evening, 7:30. It's on the other Zoom. We can send you the details if you'd like. But also, it's very much to do with the 3 weeks and this time of the year. This time of the year is a time where we think about not only the past, but the past as it empowers us for the future. So the past as it empowers us, and that is coming up tomorrow. That's the whole time now, but we're doing a shir on that tomorrow evening. This week, Matos Masei, and of course, Matos Masei makes it the final Sedra of the fourth book of the Torah. So we're completing the whole Sefer Bamidbar, which makes this Shabbos Chazak. And of course, the word Chazak means to be strong, and it's a bracha to ourselves and to those around us. Chazak, v'nis chazek. Let's be strong and strengthen each other, and through each other, we'll be further strong. So it's Shabbos Chazak, it's a big Shabbos. In addition to being Shabbos Chazak, this Shabbos also has the fact that it's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. Shabbos Rosh Chodesh is a very interesting combination. Of course, Shabbos is Mekadsha V'Kaima. Shabbos is always holy, whether we know it's Shabbos or not. Just by the fact that it became the seventh day of the week, it is a holy time compared to Rosh Chodesh, which was a man-made date. In the good old days, when we didn't have the Churban Abayis, we had the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. In those times, every Rosh Chodesh was announced, and Ms. Mekadsha, through the Yisrael, through Yiddish people, the Sanhedrin would make it special. And that's the idea between a top-down approach, Hashem establishes when it's going to be Shabbos, and a bottom-up approach when the human being, the Yiddish people, raise themselves and create a Yom Tov, a special day, a Rosh Chodesh, a calendar. And when these two dates come together, you have a Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, like this Shabbos is going to be. That is the union of the two ideas. When two things come together, it's much more than just 1 + 1. And that's this Shabbos, the Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. It happens to be that it's also a very special Rosh Chodesh. It's the Rosh Chodesh of Menachem Av. And of course, we know that the word Av is the name of the month. Menachem Av was added an extra name, so it should bring comfort in the time that needs most comfort. It does carry with it the saddest day in the Jewish calendar, in the month of Av. But before that, it also has, in Chodesh Av, we have the only yahrzeit named by its very date, listed in the Torah, and that is, I don't know if it's the only one, it's definitely one of the only ones, but it's certainly in there, where we are told which day Aaron HaKohen passed away, and it was the 5th of Menachem Av, and this is coming up also next week, and it's the yahrzeit of Aaron, Oyev Shalom, V'roides Shalom. It's a tremendous time for us to take stock and take into account the power that we have. So this is the month of Av, Chodesh Av, and also it happens to be a Shabbos within the 9 days. This year we have 2 Shabbosim in the 9 days. The first of the 9 days, Aleph Menachem Av, Rosh Chodesh is Shabbos, and then on Ches Menachem Av, the 8th day of Av is once again Shabbos. And Shabbos in the 9 days has with it a very, very interesting combination. On the one hand, it's in the time of mournings when the Yiddish people are commemorating, remembering sad times. And it's during those times where we have all sorts of halachas that forbid us from actively getting involved in things that make us happy. However, on Shabbos, it's forbidden to demonstrate any sort of mourning, even for the Beis Hamikdash. And in addition to that, there becomes permissible ways to be able to be happy and increase joy when it's Shabbos or in general through the Limud Torah. And that's why when it comes to Shabbos, during the 9 days, it's a very special time for us, for you and I. We can personally look at the 9 days with almost like when you look at the sun and the sunglasses, it's the other way around. We can look at the darkness and we have shades. We can look at the hardships and we have a safety buffer. We have a safety veil that allows us to look at that sadness with a good eye. That's what Shabbos does for us. It allows us to see, look into the eye of the hardships, of the tzaras, of the sadness, of the difficulties that came and brought us to the point where we're in. And using the koyach of Shabbos, we can uplift ourselves to be able to navigate the hardships so that we can come out on the other side empowered and uplifted. And this is why we learn Torah extra throughout the 9 days. And certainly when it comes to Shabbos, we do things that will increase the joy of Shabbos so that there shouldn't be the slightest chashash. Nobody should think that we're mourning on Shabbos, and that way the 9 days are uplifting us and bring us more simcha and focus so that when the 9 days come, we have what it takes to grow. Any questions?
Just ask, what is chashash?
Chashash is concern.
Thank you.
Oh, so there shouldn't be any concern that anybody's mourning on Shabbos, which is forbidden. Yes. Having said, the truth is, mourning in things that are not obvious in the public eye are permitted on Shabbos. But anything that's seen, anything that's noticeable should not be done in a way that looks like it's mourning. So if somebody tends to be in a bad mood on Shabbos, this Shabbos, they got to make sure that they shouldn't be in a bad mood if they can help it. Okay, we all can help it. Be'ez Hashem, we should learn lots of Torah and remind ourselves of how precious we all are, and that should help us. That we shouldn't have to be in a bad mood. Okay, let's do Matos Masei, summary of the Parshah, and then we'll get into the title, which is I'm with you there too. How our mistakes are part of, what's the word here? I don't see it. I have to look at, what does it say? Of the master plan. Okay. Let's do the Parshahs Matos and Masei. Matos and Masei, 2 loaded Parshas, and Parshas Matos opens up with the importance of watching what we say. I know there is a common, I think it's an English kind of thing, but I heard it a lot, where people want to emphasize how true what they're saying is, and they say, Emes Hashem. It's a very serious thing to say. If anything, if you ask the Rav or you check the Shulchan Aruch, it's something we should be extremely careful not to say. Because when we say something, in Yiddishkeit, the words that we say have tremendous meaning. Today's day and age, if someone says, I'll kill you, chas v'shalom, or they don't say chas v'shalom, or someone says, I love you, or I hate you, it means almost nothing. Because words are used, are thrown around as if it's whatever, big deal, so I said it, I didn't mean it. But in Yiddishkeit, no, words have tremendous weight. And certainly if we say something in a vow, or we mention it in the name of Hashem, it becomes very serious. So serious that we have to keep our word and it's a issur to not keep the word. If someone takes a vow to say that something is not going to do or something that they will do, that becomes legally binding. So much so that if someone breaks their word when it's a neder or a shvu, it's a vow or an oath, then they can be punishable with malchus for breaking their commitment. So taking a commitment, even if it wasn't in writing, but it was a commitment that was said by way of oath, that's very serious. And there's a way to annul it. There's a way to get out, whether it's through going to a beis din or a dayan mumcha, and they are matir neder, they untie the knot, they untie the oath, or whether it's a spouse, a husband who is made for the neder, removes it from the outset for on the first day before it ends at the end of the day for his wife. Wherever the case is, it's something that's a big deal. And in this week's Parshah, we learn about that big deal of how we should be extremely careful of the words that we utter, certainly in the way of an oath, of a promise. We then move on to the Mechemes Midian. The war against Midian, the Melchama, that war was an interesting war because there are two very interesting facts associated with the war. Number one is that this Mechemes Midian is connected to last week's Parshah and the Parshah before. The Parshah before was Balak, in which he hires Bilam, the sorcerer and the smoothsayer, who was going to curse the Yidden. And he was unable to, instead made a plan of how the Yidden should self-destruct. And unfortunately, 200,000 men lost their lives on Bilam's plot. There's a lot of people. It was a big deal. And the plague only stopped after killing 24,000 of those. 176,000 were killed by the Sanhedrin. 24,000 were killed in a plague. And the plague wasn't asking no questions. People were dying. 24,000 died in the plague. And the plague only stopped when Pinchas did what he did. He stood up and he said, hold on, I'm not going with the flow. We have to stand up for what's right. And he stopped Zimri and Cosby in their tracks. And with that, Hashem stopped the plague. And in last week's Parashah, we read how Hashem rewarded Pinchas. In this week's Parashah, Hashem says to Moshe, we have to finish that story. And that's going to be the war against Midian. We'll get back to that in a moment. The war against Midian and the connection to it. But also, Hashem says to Moshe, I want you to war against Midian, but you should know that this will be your last mitzvah, your last instruction. And after this war, Moshe Rabbeinu, your life will come to an end. Your service will end. This will be your last big deal, your last project, your last campaign. And after that, you've already empowered Yeshua. That was in last week, etc. And you will then hand over the reins to Yeshua. Fascinatingly, this is Parshas Matos. We have Masei, and then it's the whole Sefer Devarim, which is Moshe Rabbeinu's final days, his last words, his last will and testament as he revises it. So this is the Mechemes Midian. Now you could imagine if Moshe Rabbeinu finds out that after he finishes the war, that's the end of his life. So he knows he's going to fight a war. He knows he's going to be successful. And he knows that after the war, it's over. So what would he think he's going to do? Delay the war. And as long as the war doesn't play itself out, he's got time extended. But not Moshe. Not Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu hears Hashem say, this is what you should do. Regardless of what the price might or might not be, it's irrelevant. He has an instruction from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and he does it right away. And he gets going immediately, sets himself out for this war, the war against Midian. Now, how does the war against Midian tie in with Bilam's plot, with Pinchas and the 24,000 people who unfortunately lost their lives? And the answer is because Midian, Cosby was a princess from Midian. They were heavily involved in the Bilam project. So much so that they led the way in how extreme they were planning on ripping down the Yid and trying to entice them to worship the Baal, the Pa'er idol. And unfortunately, they were extremely successful. But what they didn't have in mind, they didn't imagine was that this war against Midian was going to so much pay them back. Because Hashem says to Moshe, Midian, no way. It was true that Midian was together with Moav. Moav was the nation that Balak was the king of. but they had at least an excuse for why they picked a fight with the Jewish people. They argued that they were worried, they were concerned, they were on the border, and they were worried that maybe these people are going to attack them, and therefore they felt compelled to attack the Jew first. Okay, they were wrong, but we can understand where they're coming from. We can at least get in their head what they were thinking. Midian, no way. Midian, you had no reason. There was no reason for Midian to pick a fight. We weren't breathing down their back. We weren't anywhere close to them. We had nothing wrong to them. We hadn't attacked them. We hadn't picked a fight with them. We haven't even consulted them. So why did Midian get involved? And of course, the answer is Midian got involved because they love to fight. And especially, they love to attack the Yid. And that, says Hashem to Moshe, is poisonous. When you have a nation that is willing to not only pick a fight, and not only to teach their girls, their royalty, their princesses, that it's worth giving everything up just to attack an enemy, but to do it for no other reason other than to tear down the Yiddish people. That's extreme, and that is so warped, so dangerous, so toxic. We have to take out Midian now. Don't wait for them for another round. Don't wait to meet them on the battlefield. You bring the battlefield to them, because this is too toxic to have around. And the Moshe Rabbeinu follows the instruction, and they take out Midian, entire Midian. And of course, they have the spoils of the war, which makes a very brilliant segue into what Moshe Rabbeinu teaches the Yiddish people. First of all, Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us something that David HaMelech learned from him, and that is that although you have the soldiers that go out to fight the battle, you have Pikud HaOref, the home front, the soldiers that stay behind to protect the camp and to look after those who are in the camp, the families. And Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us that you split the spoils of the war, but not just between those who went out to fight, because it's not measured by how dangerous it was. It's measured by how much commitment there was. How dedicated were the soldiers? Those who went out to war and those who were dedicated to stay behind got equal share. And then we learn also about the Matos, the taxes, so to speak, where they had to give from the spoils. They gave some to the Levi and some to the Kohanim, and that was the tax that was given from the spoils of the war. And then we learn the other sets of halachas. We learn the halachas of Tum and Tahar, where Moshe Rabbeinu teaches the Yiddish people the halachas of what happens when someone on the battlefield came in contact with a dead person. And then the utensils that were also in contact with dead people, before they can be used for kachim, for taharas, they have to go through a mikvah process of tahara. Not just for mikvah, but because it's dead bodies, you have to have the paraduma, 3rd and 7th day sprinkling, and only then does it become tahar to use. And then we have another interesting piece where Elazar HaKohen teaches the Yiddish people how you can use non-kosher utensils. Non-kosher utensils are written in this week's Parshah of how to kasher them, but what's so common is the mistake between kashering a utensil that has non-kosher flavoring in it, and then how to make a utensil that comes from a home that isn't Jewish, how you can make it usable by putting it in a mikveh. Now, these two areas are so commonly mixed up. Baruch Hashem, those of us who grew up in a home that this was clear, we might have it clearer. But I'm sure you haven't come across it yet. You might come across it, where someone says, oh, if something became kosher, just dip it in the mikveh. Where does that come from? The truth is, it starts off in this week's Sedra. In the same pasuk that teaches us how to kasher utensils, also teaches us that when a utensil comes from a non-Jewish home, it must go in the mikveh. But the truth is, these two sets of halachas aren't interdependent. You can have a brand new utensil that's never been used, has zero flavoring in it, certainly not no kosher flavoring, and it needs to go to the mikveh. It's brand new from John Lewis's, from Argus, from wherever you bought it, from Azach, Vesvas, and you got to dip in the mikveh because it's a new utensil. And that's the halachas of Tfilas Kelim. And then alongside that, you also have that if a utensil got used and it has inside of it the flavoring of non-kosher, whether it's milk and meat, whether it's non-kosher meat or any other non-kosher ingredient. So now this utensil has in it a non-kosher flavoring. Anything that will be used and heated up in this utensil will absorb this non-kosher flavoring, and therefore must be kashered. The only way you can use it is if you first kasher it and you extract all the non-kosher flavoring. And both of these halachos are written in this week's Parshah mixed together. The pasuk says that the kalim, the vessels, the utensils that came from this Midian war, Allah also taught the people that they need to kasher it and they need to dip it in the mikveh. But really, these are two sets of halachas, and it's important to know. Kashering is nothing to do with new or old. It's got to do with where it came from. If it's from a non-Jewish home, and you could have bought it in Israel, but if it was made in China, then it was made in China, and therefore it was made in a non-kosher factory, unless the factory was owned by Yid, and you got a question. Usually, anything that comes from a regular source of acquisition, even if it's first-hand, it's not a second-hand keli, must go to the keli mikveh. And the materials that need. And then you have the material utensil that was used for non-kosher food, a second-hand pot or second-hand ladle or whatever else it is, a pan. That has to be kashered, and the way to do that is a little bit detailed, but generally speaking, whatever heat source was used to make it unkosher, that's the type of heat you need to make it kosher again. So if it was the kind of pot that gets filled with water and it's heat through liquid, then it needs to be kashered through heat through liquid. But if it was a barbecue or an oven that is dry heat, then it needs to be kashered on dry heat. And if it was just cold, then it just needs rinsing out, then it's cold kashering, and that's allowed. So all these halachas are brought from the Midian war and the spoils that followed. We then have the end of the Parshah, Parshah's Matos, that is. We're still on Parshah's Matos. I did say it's a long Parshah. We have how the Yiddish people now are splitting up the land of Eretz Yisrael. They've already, in last week's Parshah, had the goyrel of who gets which areas. And in this week's Parshah, we have Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, which are telling us that they come to Moshe and they say, Moshe Rabbeinu, we have a lot of cattle, we have a lot of flock, and we would like to make our portion of land of Eretz Yisrael here now. And the first sound, Moshe hears them say, they don't want to cross over into the Israel mainland. They'd rather stay here on the east bank of the Jordan. And what it sounded like was that they would rather not have to pick another fight and fight in mainland Israel, all the mighty nations that are there. Let's settle here. And that was very worrying. That sounded like they were repeating the same mistake of the Meraglim, of the spies. They don't want to go into Eretz Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu picks them on and says, what are you hearing? We've done 40 years of traveling, of wandering in the desert, just because of what your grandparents did. You want to do that again? Another time we're going to have the same mistake. You're arguing you don't want to go into Israel. And of course they say no. We love Israel. We can't get enough of Eretz Yisrael. We desperately want to be in Eretz Yisrael. We want to have a part of Eretz Yisrael sooner rather than later. When the war happens and we cross over later on this year, we'll be the forefront. We will be the spearhead of the armies. But let us already have a part of Eretz Yisrael now instead of waiting. Moshe loves it. Moshe Rabbeinu can't get enough. Wow. What a turnaround. Your grandparents were staying away at all costs. And you are desperate to be part of it, and you're willing to be the spearheads. I love it, says Moshe. Not only will you be here, I'm going to encourage others to do the same as you. So you have from just Reuven and Gad, Moshe Rabbeinu makes a Reuven Gad plus another part of another Shevet, Katzi Shevet Menashe, and he actually gives them that portion of land, and they set up the shop, they conquer a few extra places, and they've settled the first parts of Eretz Yisrael, the east bank of the Jordan, of the lands west of the Jordan. I'm not sure what that means. Okay, they settle there. Sorry, and they will lead the battle when they go across to the other side. Now I just read the passage. Okay, that's Parshas Matos in a nutshell. We haven't finished yet. I know the clock's ticking, but let's do the summary in Parshas Masei. It's not so hard. It's only a few points. The bulk of the parsha at the beginning is describing the 42 journeys, the Mem-Beis Masei. What are the Mem-Beis Masei? When the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, they didn't go one journey all the way to Eretz Yisrael. As we just mentioned, they wandered in the desert for 40 years, and they had 42 journeys. And those 42 journeys are summarized in this week's Parsha, with all the pleasant and not so pleasant stories of each one of those stops. And we had quite a few of them, which weren't so shining stories, like the golden calf, or the complaints, or Korach's rebellion, and the Meraglim, the spies, and unfortunately the list goes on. But each one of those stops are summarized in this week's Parsha, and then the Parsha goes on to list out the borders of Eretz Yisrael. Amazing. The same land of Israel that we look and face towards when we daven today. 3,500 years ago, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't just say that's our homeland. He tells us the exact defined borders of where it is, where it starts and where it ends, where it stretches to and where it doesn't stretch to. It's all listed and detailed in this week's Sedra. And then along that, we also have the mitzvah of Ir Miklat, where we have to establish cities of refuge, where chas v'shalom, manslaughter, somebody gets caught up in a mistake and causes the death of a fellow human being, they're not put to death. It's not capital crime. It's something that was a mistake. But nonetheless, if they had allowed themselves to be in a position that could create a mistake that somebody got killed, then they have to run to the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, and live there. Oftentimes, it was for a long time. They have to live there until the Kohen Gadol passed away, and sometimes it could mean for the rest of their life. And that would be part of the atonement, but also it would be a place that would stay safe. The mitzvah of the Ir Miklat is not only to set up cities of refuge, but also to create a very good network of easy to walk on roads, highways, and not only highways that are easy to reach these Ir Miklat, city of refuge, but also to signpost the directions at every fork of the road. If you're looking for cities of refuge, it's this way, and this is your closest city of refuge. Who are we trying to help by having these roads and signposts? We're looking to help a killer. True, an unintentional killer, and a killer by mistake, but that's who we're trying to help. Says the Torah, yes. It's a responsibility of anybody who knows how to help such a person. It's a responsibility of the Rabbanim and the Beis Din to establish easy ways for those who need help to reach that help. Signposting. And of course, you can imagine the Rebbe makes a massive deal out of the obligation of signposting. Don't wait for somebody to come and say, oh, I wish I could do teshuvah. I wish I could find my way back to shul. I wish I could find my way back to a better life. If only someone could help me, for sure then we should help them. Don't wait for them to ask. Signpost it. Reach out. Help them know that help is available. And help them know that they want help. Now we're talking signposting. What's one of the interesting messages? And of course, the end of the story is again the righteous women. We have the story of Matos, the daughters of Tzlafchad, who in last week's Sedra managed to get a new halacha that they should also have a portion at Yisrael. In this week's Parsha, we learn that they married within their tribes. So as we said last week, the agricultural land, the inheritance, the Kedushas Haaretz that they received on behalf of their Shevet should remain within their Shevet. They received in behalf of their tribe. It was part of the tribal division. So generally speaking, whatever a woman owns comes along with her in her marriage. And if she marries into a different tribe, that will then transfer to a different tribe. And these 5 girls righteously married within their own tribe, and thereby retaining the tribal hold on those portions of the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael as well. And that's how the Parsha ends with a chazak, v'nis chazek. We learn a lot of things in this week's Parsha, a lot of different details. And as we said, it's a very long reading. When you're doing your chitas, you're doing your shnai mikra, you're getting ready for leining. Remind yourself that this is, I think, the longest setup, Matos plus Masei, nice good chunk of Torah. And we're going to try and find one area that's going to be a practical, relevant life message for today. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, now is a good time to ask. Thank you, Hashem. Okay. No comments, questions, no suggestions. We're going right in. Here's the question I'm going to ask. Between these 4 things, which is most prone to make a mistake? An animal, planets, computers, or humans? Animals, planets, computers, humans. Who is most likely to make a mistake?
Humans.
Absolutely. Are we the only part of creation that makes such mistakes? And the way we ask this is, are we the glaring exception to God's otherwise perfect universe? And if you want to go philosophical, are we undermining Hashem's master plan? Are we ruining Hashem's plan?
We might be, because Mashiach's not come yet.
One up. We got one argument. Anyone else?
No, we are not. It's all part of Hashem's plan.
All part of Hashem's plan, even the bad things that people do.
Well, maybe
Yes,
that
sure.
will teach us to do the right things.
We should definitely do the right thing. I think we all agree. But yes, we do have an angle that even the bad things that we do are part of the plan, although Hashem wants us to not do it. Hashem certainly doesn't want us to do it. He wants us to learn and to teach ourselves and others to not do the bad things we're doing. But as we just said, human beings are prone to making mistakes. And sometimes we do mistakes on purpose. We do mistakes that we shouldn't be doing, but we know we're doing them. And it's just the way it works. Here's the question that the Rebbe is going to ask as well. And that is, if I look myself in the mirror and I notice that I've made a bad choice. So let's assume we're going to be honest. Although most times we're not. Most times, at least in my front, I'd rather ignore it than look myself in the mirror honestly, because it's hard to do that. It's hard to be honest. And it's hard to accept that that's really what I just did. But as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, if I'm going to look at myself and notice that I'm a Rasha, one or two things are going to happen. Either I'll become flippant and complacent and indifferent. I'm a Rasha. That's it. That's the new me. This is who I am. Oh, this is the old me. This is who I am. This is what I do. I'm just a bad guy. I'm just a nasty fellow. Stay out the way because I'm coming. That's one option, which obviously is a very not good option. And the other option, says the Alter Rebbe, is that we get depressed. Yeru levavim. V'yiyotzif. If I'm honest with myself and I realize that I'm a Rasha, I realize that I make mistakes and I do things that Hashem says I shouldn't do. So my self-image goes out the window. My hope for ever being a good person's out the window. I'm probably going to get depressed and say, you know what a loser I am. And I certainly don't think it's ever going to be preventable, because just like I made a mistake one time and again, what's to say, or what chance do I have to ever rectify it? And here, the Alter Rebbe makes his argument. In this week's Parshah, the Rebbe is going to argue that this week's Parshah gives us a personal tool. And why it makes it personal is, although everyone has the same tool, what works for me, or the way it works for me, is specific to me. If anyone has any questions, comments, suggestions, now's a good time to ask.
Yeah, the question is, why does it have to be Russia? Why can't it be Baal Teshuvah? Why can't I do the next right thing and feel sorry for it and then use it as a trampoline, a jumping board for better?
It's a great question. I'll tell you personally, the answer for me is that I'm honest. And my track record talks for itself. Statistically, the same me that made a mistake today, yesterday, the day before, it's wishful thinking to think I'm going to hold it up. That's the argument. It's devil's advocate.
No, it isn't. Because you might meet somebody who would help you, and your whole life could change the next day. That's a difference, surely.
Yes, but that's like almost like a miracle. You know what? You're right. I'm not.
Some people have never had a chance to do the right thing. So we're saying, oh, it's wrong, and you're wrong. And maybe they have done wrong, but it doesn't mean that somebody won't get hold of them and they will do the right thing eventually, to let them see what's right.
Absolutely. I think what you were saying is exactly where we want to go today. And we want to build on that and say, not just maybe, absolutely. Not to someone else, even within ourselves. Yes, sometimes we do need help from outside. Sometimes, even if we don't need it, it's very helpful to have help from the outside. But we have to believe that, yes, we can. And what we're going to focus on specifically is the lesson that this week's Parshah brings to the table in this discussion. And that is that we have to have faith that even if I'm honest, and more importantly, specifically because I'll be honest, that's how I will have what it takes to be able to change. Sometimes we say to ourselves, you know what? Let's ignore the severity of what's going on. Let's focus on something small and start with that. And in this week's Parsha, the Parsha is telling us that might be a path. But there's another path that says, don't be afraid to own up, to label myself and accept that, yes, this is what I have done, past tense, done. And it doesn't have to mean that it will continue that way forward. And I have what it takes. How do I know I have what it takes? There's a beautiful quote. I think Mordechai ben David sings it. I think it's from Rav Nachman of Breslov. If you believe that it's possible to mess up, to ruin it, then certainly you got to believe that you can fix it. If I have, as a creation, I have the power to do what a creator says I shouldn't do and to bend it out of shape, how do I have that strength? How do I have that ability? And the answer is Hashem empowered me to do that. Oh, the reason why I was able to make a mess is because Hashem allowed me, gave me the power, the koyach, to make a mess. Oh boy, you have to be so sure that Hashem most certainly gave us the power to get on track, to get back on track. And this is going to be an idea that's going to be stretched, built up, so much more lichtig, the way this particular sikha, this week's Parshah, Parshas Matos Masei, teaches us how we should believe in the neshama that we are, in the precious jewel and diamond that each and every one of us is. And this is where we want to explore this week. This is so Mashiachdik. This is so Goladik. Let's do it. Let's learn a little bit. Let's start off with the pasuk in this week's Parshah. It's in Parshas Masei. So these are the journeys of the children of Israel who left the land of Egypt in their legions under the charge of Moshe and Aaron. Moshe recorded their starting points from the journeys according to the word of Hashem. And these were the journeys with their starting points. The journey from Ramses in the first month, on the 15th day of the first month. By the way, the 15th day of the first month, the 15th day of Nisan is Pesach in our calendar. Says the pasuk on the day following the Karban Pesach, the Seder night. The Karban Pesach was brought on the 14th, the Erev Pesach. The Seder night was last night, and we left Ramses the next morning, the next afternoon. The children of Israel, Bnei Yisrael, left triumphantly before the eyes of all the Egyptians. Out they marched. Out we marched. Okay, Eila Masei Bnei Yisrael. Says Rashi, quoting the Medrash, these are the journeys. Beautiful mashal. Rashi says something needs explaining here. Let me explain to you by way of a mashal, of a parable. It's an analogy to a king whose son became sick. So he, the king, took him to a faraway place to have him healed. He's taking him to the special doctors. He's taking him to a place that's going to heal, or a special resort. On the way back, the father began citing all the stages of the journey, saying to him, this is where we sat. Here we were cold. Here you had a headache. So to Hashem instructed Moshe to list all the places of the Jewish people and where they angered Hashem. Thus it is stated, these are the journeys. Effectively, Rashi is telling us that 42 journeys in 40 years, 19 of them we were in one place. Okay, so we had quite a hectic time for the other 21 years, but we had a lot of journeys, 42 journeys, and now it's coming to an end. We're finally reaching our destination. Let's turn around and look back and describe the different things we did in each place. That's Rashi. And of course, the question is going to be, why do we have to look back? And why should we look back and notice all the mistakes? What are we hoping to achieve? Why bring up the trauma now? It's coming to a close. It's behind us. Why do we need it again? And these questions are questions that are questions you can ask any day. And in particular, we've got a good answer. Let me ask you, do you have any good suggestions, answers, or angles to look at these two questions? Why are we looking back at the mistakes? And why now when we're finally getting behind it?
Maybe you don't want to make the same mistakes again. And by looking at something you've done in the past, you can actually make sure, hopefully, that you don't do it in the future.
Beautiful. So the reason we look back into history is for inspiration for the future. There you go. We look back at what happened in the past, and it will help us not make the same mistakes. Great angle. Anyone else want to add to that? Any other good suggestions, reasons, or ideas of why we might be revisiting the mistakes that we made over the past 40 years, and why particularly now? And we're going to just throw in for good measure one more question. The mashal, the parable that the Rashi brings down of the king traveling back and going through and telling his son what happened in each place is a little bit tricky because it doesn't really add up. The Jewish people aren't going back anywhere. They're staying in one place. They're just remembering. They're going back in their minds. So why does Rashi use a mashal of going back, not only in their minds, but actually practically going back? And this is going to be the key to understanding what Rashi is getting at. Rashi is telling us that they went back in their minds, and that's exactly where they had to rectify. That's exactly where they had to fix up their mistakes. They had to fix up mistakes, not in practice. They had to fix up the mistakes in their minds. The way we're going to understand this is the famous Hasidic approach, and that is that you have a city where people live. And then you have a field where people don't live, but people work. And then further afield, you have a desert. And in the desert, people don't live. People don't even work. The desert is a place where there's no human beings don't hang out there. And if we use this analogy, humans are creative, productive beings, goodness beings. People create goodness. So a midbar, a desert, is a place where there's no goodness happening. There's snakes, vipers, and scorpions. There's badness going on. It's an evil place. Not literally, but metaphorically. So traveling through the desert is the idea of traveling through evil. And the 42 journeys that took us from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, all the way through to the Holy Land, the Eretz Yisrael, the Eretz HaKodesh, traveled through the desert, traveled and journeyed through the negativity and the evil of a place that's void of productivity. And the idea was to weaken and cut off the vitality from the negative forces. And that was the 42 steps. The 42 journeys were exactly that. So if the purpose of journeys from leaving Mitzrayim, for a place of meitzar, of constraints, of withholding, and all these journeys are in order to get to Eretz HaKodesh, every single step of the way, as we break free, becomes another journey of Yetzias Mitzrayim. When it comes to Yerichai, this is the Alter Rebbe talking. Comes along the Kota Sichas, and it tells us, by definition, the soul's journeys through the desert of this world, our personal journey, from when we're born, and we journey through this world, which to the neshama is a desert. It's so far removed from where neshamas like to hang out. It's so far removed from the holiness of where our neshama is used to. It's a place of utter godly concealment. And while it's true that the purpose of this plunge is for the height to which you will eventually reach, we're on a journey because we're going to good places. The reality is that during the journey, it's very much feels like a downfall. It's only that thereby, and later on, one reaches greater heights. This world is like a journey through the desert. From the moment that my baby was born, and every day as the baby grows and becomes a toddler and grows older until it becomes a teenager and becomes even older and maybe have their own children, every single step of that journey is far, far away from neshama's comfort zone. It's a desert. And we're grappling with, we're dealing with, we're struggling with to overcome the evil and to overcome the negativity that we call normal, we call life. But that's a journey. It's a journey that's allowing us to be able to reach a destination that we would never have reached without the journey. Now, when does this feel this way? During the journey, of course. When one finally reaches the mountaintop, they are able to see the true purpose of the exile below. And we can see that it was really nothing else other than a part of the climb up. And the hardship is a part of climbing up. This is what we're learning here. We're learning that this desert mashal, the Torah story of 42 journeys through the desert, is the journey of our life. And it's the journey of our life we're trying to build up. So now, during the journey, whilst we're journeying, it doesn't look like a mountain climb. It just looks like a real grueling hardship. When can we look back and say, you know what? I'm so glad I was thrown into that journey. I'm so glad I was put through that. Only when you're out on the other side. And once we are out on the other side, we can say, oh, I'm so glad I'm here. And I can look back and say, I'm so glad I did the journey. Moshe Rabbeinu has finally brought the Yiddish people, and they're about to go into Eretz Yisrael. Now, says Moshe, let's look back. Let's revisit. Not literally, we're not literally going to journey back. We need to go forward. But in our minds, we're going to revisit every single one of those downers, of those drawbacks, of those failures. And I'm going to say, you know why we had such a hard time? You know why life was so difficult? Life was so difficult because we were going upwards. We were journeying forward. And now we can look back and say, the further back we were stretched, that brought us further forward. Like you have the picture of the slingshot. When we stretch further back, that's what brought us to the positive place. Now it's time to reframe it. Reframe it in such a way that we remind ourselves that every part of the journey was part of growth. Not just the ups, but the downs are also. That sort of idea can only be explored once we're at the end. So, once we're not yet at the end, we don't have to expect ourselves to understand how the failures or the hardships are part of the success. But we do expect ourselves to be wise enough to know that we will one day understand. And although we can't understand it now, we can already have the faith that it will be reframed. Hashem won't let us suffer for no reason. Hashem is Teva Toiv, and Teva Toiv is Lehetiv, and certainly there is a good cause. There's a bigger picture that we are unaware of. That is, you don't need chassidus for this. This is general ideas. But the next level we're going to do, which we're going to hopefully do in the next 10 minutes, is to explore what really seems to be a much stronger question and much closer to home. Because the fact that we don't have the couch and the house and the luxuries and the comforts that we need and we love and we wish we had, and we say to ourselves, this is part of Hashem's master plan. Hashem will bring to us exactly what we need so that we will be able to grow and become the best human beings, the best me I can be. And when we get there, we'll look back and say, you know what? I now understand why Hashem withheld this, that, and the other. And unfortunately, Hashem dumped this, that, and the other on us. We had to deal with it. And we did. And through that, we came to the beautiful place that we're about to come to. Now, as Hashem. That all makes sense. But here's the question. It makes sense only for the areas that Hashem did to us. What about the areas that there's no one else to blame but me? Hashem didn't do it to us. I did it to us. I did it to me. And I look myself in the mirror and say to myself, I'm so embarrassed of myself. Forget embarrassed. I'm so fed up. I'm so fed up. I'm so upset at myself. I'm so depressed. I feel like such a schmerel. I feel like such a whatever. Loser. Now what? How can I say that this is also part of the goodness? What am I thinking? How can this even be? And here's where the Rebbe says we need to remind ourselves that actually this also. So let's learn the question inside, and then we're going to ask somebody or a few people, anyone who has a good answer, to explain to us how we can justify our own mistakes. And they'll still look at ourselves and say, you know what, we're comfortable to keep on going. One can understand in as much as the overall plunge into the wilderness of the desert is set up in advance by Hashem. And therefore, it's ultimately rendered a kindness a part of the climb up. It wouldn't have happened unless Hashem knows that this is goodness. But, question mark, exclamation mark, but those times that the Jews angered Hashem in the desert were a result of the Jews' wanton sins. In other words, the Jews set in motion a downfall beyond what was ordained from on high. What then compels us to argue that they too, these downfalls as well, are part of the climb up? How can we suggest that our own mistakes, our own unpurposes, our own bad choices are also part of the climb up, are also bringing us to Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land? How can that be?
Well, Hashem made us like that, didn't he? So it's
love
not
it.
our fault.
My daughter tells me it's not my fault I did it. My Yetzer Hara made me do it. I love it. Yes, absolutely. Hashem made us this way, and therefore it's not our fault. So why do we get punishment for it? And why are we expected to do teshuvah? Of course, it's very dangerous to become a person who's flippant and says, "Oh, it's not my fault; it's Hashem's fault." I'm sure that's what you mean. I'm trying to draw out more words. Please add on to what you were saying.
What about the person who doesn't realize that they're actually doing the wrong thing and they can't even get on the first rung of the ladder because they are so low? I mean, they feel so low. What then? There are a lot of people now in what's been going on who have got to that stage, and to get them even a little further up with the help that they need, which may not be there. What about them? What about those people?
Absolutely. For these people, we can have an easier time theologically, not practically, but theologically, and say to ourselves, that wasn't their choice. They did nothing wrong, and therefore, for them or for us to say, actually, that's an act of God. And if it's an act of Hashem, then it's an easier time for us to say that there must be some goodness in it. Even if we can't understand it, we're not on top of the mountain yet, but we can assume safely. We can be sure, not just assume, we can be certain that it's kindness. We don't understand it. It's so far from me, it's even hard to say the words. It's hard to say that it's kindness, but we can move along with confidence that it must be, if it came from Hashem, was an act of Hashem, beyond their control. They didn't choose it. They didn't choose to do it. So then it must be, if it's Hashem's act, then Hashem must have a plan. We're asking, from a theological point of view, it's more complicated for us to say that if I decided to go on a binge and just do everything that I want and do things that I know is wrong, and if you ask me, is it right or wrong? I'll tell you, no, it's wrong. I'm just having fun. I'm just doing what I want. And now I turn around and say, you know what? I'm a real mess. Can I still say that that mess that I made is going to be a climb up? It's going to be kindness. It's going to be Hashem's way of helping me grow.
Yeah, of course.
Because you recognize it. You recognize that you've done something wrong. Once you recognize it, you can do something about it. So it is up to you then, isn't it? If you've got...
It's up to me. It certainly is up to me. But what we're asking here is it fair to say that in that case, I'm also going to grow out of it, or I can stop doing it?
Well, if you've done something to grow, to improve, to grow from, if you've done bad and then you become better, then that's a much higher place than never having been bad in the first place.
So if I was reckless in my driving and I tore down someone's, I don't know, I drove into someone's front lounge, and for the rest of however many years, I'm going to be paying off the damage that I've done. And I've definitely regretted it. But it was my choice to drive recklessly. I was joyriding and it was no one else to blame. Can I say that it was part of Hashem's kindness?
Yeah, because I learned from it. Sometimes a child needs to, for example, the parent says, don't eat these apples, they're too green, you get the stomach ache. But the child eats them anyway, gets the stomach ache, and then actually learn, oh, the parents are actually right. So now I'm going to do it because I tested it out and they were right. And similarly, that's what we do sometimes.
Yep. So learning from mistakes is something that we can't do if we don't make a mistake. That's true. And we're in the next 3 minutes, I'm a little bit against the clock, I'm going to try and summarize the Rebbe's revolutionary approach. And now it's learned from this week's Sedra, and that is the following. Every choice that we make is only a choice from the options that are available to us. Some options are not made available to us. The options that are made available to us are made available to us because Hashem decided that we can grow out of it. Not just that we can grow out of it, but out of it, we can have growth. out of this option, we have growth. And the Rebbe argues that Hashem would not allow this option to be an option unless the growth that can come out of this mistake or this bad choice is a growth that you would not be able to get any other simpler, smoother, easier way. Hashem's, in his wisdom, infinity, has developed every option that he makes available for us. We can't decide to rob a bank today. I mean, at least I can't. I don't have the means. It would only be available to me if Hashem thought that mistake, when I catch myself, will allow me to grow out of it. Not just to grow out of it, out of it I should have growth. Like you said, the green apples. The growth that sometimes the child can have is impossible to have any other way. The example that is used in Chassidus is often teaching your child to walk. The child's going to learn to walk, and part of that process is going to be falling over. Do we want the child to fall? No. No parent is happy when the child's falling. But what do we do when the child falls? We clap. Yay, you took 2 steps. I know you just fell, but yeah, you took 2 steps. I didn't clap a second ago because I was still letting you walk the 2 steps. After the first step, I didn't clap, but after the second step, and then the child fell, I clap. Oh, get up, let's do another one. Are we happy the child fell? No, but that option was made available by a very kind parent. And what we have to realize is not just that if Hashem allowed me to fail, then for sure he allows me to rectify that failing. The only reason why the failing was made an option, was allowed to exist. The only reason why I was able to make that mistake, and keep something simple, but eat something I shouldn't have eaten, but much more than that. I can say something nasty to someone I really care about. Oh boy, am I in such trouble. I've created such a world war. And I know, if I'm honest, I'm really the one to blame. And I say to myself, what a loser I am. And then the Rebbe says, learn Parshas Masei. The Yiddish people revisited even the mistakes that they had no one else to blame for. Golden calf, meraglim, complaining for the mar. And they say to themselves, yes, it's true, I'm the one to blame. But the only reason I was able to make that mistake is because when I catch myself, I'm going to grow so much out of this. That's why Hashem wanted me to be able to make this mistake. It's a Masei, it's a journey. Don't stop now. Because if I stop now, then I'm not growing out of it. And I'm putting everything on hold. But if I'm not sure whether or not I can grow out of this, remind myself that the only reason why I was able to make the mistake that I have no one else to blame for, that's ruining my life, that's ruining the people around me, that's creating such issues and such problems, it's only available because Hashem believes that I can grow out of it. When out of it, I can make so much growth. Let's do it. This is Masei. Masei is telling us not only are we precious, and not only are we doing good things, we're so precious that the only thing that we can do is things that can lead to growth. I'll do that again. The only thing we can ever do is things that can lead us to growth. It's up to us to make it and to walk down that path. That's what we're learning in this week's Parshah. Every step, whether it's up or down, whether it's forward or even if it's backwards, is always upwards. And when we can remind ourselves this reality, it's so personal. It's so personal, it's even hard to tell somebody else what we're thinking. It's even hard to tell somebody else which mistake, which downfall, which personal trouble I have, and to say that honestly, that trouble that I wish nobody ever knows is part of this journey. Hashem has allowed me to make this trouble because through it, I can reach something that will be growth. Nothing else could push me. And if that's what Hashem has faith in me about, if that's how much faith Hashem has in me, then I can have faith in myself also. In that beautiful, precious neshama Hashem has planted in me. Masei. Yes, we can. You're doing good. You're doing so well. Do that good into yourself. And don't sell ourselves short. Hashem should give us the courage in these 3 weeks, in the 9 days, to live with that faith, certainty, and absolute assurance that everything about us not only can be good, but is going to be so much better than anything before, because we can. Have we learned something today?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
The brachas for ourselves and those around us should be gebench nevach. Define yourself as an empowered and driven human being. Thank you for joining.
Amen. Thank you very
so
much.
much. Thank you, Rabbi Kai.
Tomorrow evening is the
7:30.
Beis Hamikdash. 7:30 is the different Zoom. I'll send out the message.
Thank you.